Good morning, good afternoon, or as the case may be, good evening, and welcome to Distribution Strategy Group's Technology Leader Panel. It's the second in a series on driving growth with AI in sales and marketing. And we're going to have three very distinguished panelists join us in just a moment. Benj Cohen from Proton, Varun Sridharan from Infor, and Sahitya Senapathy from Endeavor.ai. Wanted to mention one thing first, and then we'll bring on our panelists and get into a rich discussion. Should mention also today that we love to hear from you in the form of questions. Generally, if somebody poses a question and they don't identify, like they show up as anonymous, we probably will not take it. But otherwise, if you ask questions for our panelists, we'd love to have that interaction with you. So I want to just mention one thing about an offering that Distribution Strategy Group has called Demand RX. The basic question is, what would you do differently if you had a really good idea of what a given customer or prospect could be spending with you versus what they are actually spending? And the answer is you would start to focus on selling to where the gaps are. In this simple example here, category A has got a $36,000 gap. Category B, 22,000, category C, 16,000, and so forth. So if you have this information, you would start to direct a different dialogue. DemandRx provides exactly this kind of information for customers as well as prospects. So you can grow wallet share, you can grow market share, and you can find prospects in our set of 48, actually now 52 million companies. So if you'd like to learn more about DemandRx, please reach out to me, jbind@distributionstrategy.com. or 303-898-8636. I would now like to welcome our panelists, Benj Cohen from Proton, Varun from Infor, and Sahitya from Endeavor. Gentlemen.
Hey, Jonathan, thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Excited.
This is a really rich topic, as we had in the session last week, and we've seen in our own research. We'll be coming out with a report in January on state of AI. We've seen in our own research that sales is one of the very big focus areas for companies in distribution who are using AI. What I'd like to do is have each of you describe what it is your company does, and we're going to use that as a leaping off point to talk about the more general category of what your company does. So let's start, Varun, with you talking about what your company does with AI in sales for distribution.
Yeah, sure. So Infor has 90 plus industry specific ERP solutions that caters to the need of around 70,000 plus customers across the globe. And what me and my group specifically does is we build these AI/ML solutions, starting from as basic as building a forecasting solution to as advanced as creating an interactive agent-based experience for our customers. And as you can imagine, we have this huge, massive platform which we call as basically OS, which has various state-of-art algorithms and cutting-edge GenAI capabilities that powers these use cases.
And how is it being applied to sales now?
So what we have seen is when you say how it is being applied, one of the common trends that a typically distributor kind of get to do is when a disruption is actually introduced, they have a tendency to drop the price of the product. And we all know for a fact that that's a very short-sighted, impulsive decision. And I also call it as irreversible decision, because once you have actually reduced your price point, then you practically cannot go ahead and increase the price point without having any customer churn. And how we help here is trying to connect what the company's strategy or vision is and make sure that we are able to drive a good revenue by keeping the cost low. So I call this as personalization at scale. So that's what we are actually doing today for the sales persona.
So buy low, sell high.
Yep.
Very good. Okay. Benj, talk to us, please, about what Proton.ai does in AI for sales.
Yeah, so I'm Benj, founder CEO here at Proton. I grew up in my family's dental distribution business, so been in distribution my whole life. And the problem that we saw initially was how do we use all this amazing data that we have as distributors, customer data, product data, transaction data, and how do we make use of it in our sales process to help make each sales rep more effective and know what each customer needs and when they need it. So what we do is we take all the distributors' data, we analyze it with AI, and then we tell the sales reps, hey, here are the customers you should focus on, and here's what you should go sell those customers so that reps are not missing opportunities. They're recapturing every reorder, all of those different pieces. And we package that all inside our own CRM system. So we're an AI-powered CRM with the cross-sell capability built directly into it.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Sahitya, tell us about what Endeavor's doing for sales in AI.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Hey, everyone. My name's Sahithya. I'm the CEO and founder of Endeavor.ai. And, I like to joke with people, my only job here is to help you sell more using AI agents. You guys have probably heard about these AI agents in the marketplace through Salesforce and other folks. When I talk about AI agents, what I mean is they're these autonomous software programs that you give them a goal or a task like sales order entry or putting a quote together. And they can do this kind of task that, folks normally would be doing manually today without human intervention, extremely high accuracy and really quick turnaround times. And not only is there a kind of benefit in the act of automating, a quote or a sales order in terms of turning it around faster, providing a better customer experience, but it also frees up, that 50% of time that your sales folks are spending doing manual data entry so that they can do the higher value tasks that you want them to do and that they want to do, like getting face time with the customer, upselling, doing product recommendations, order improvement, managing churn, and so on. And so that's what we do. We apply AI agents for distribution, these sales tasks like quoting, order entry.
Terrific. Terrific. So what I'd like to cover now in each of these categories that you're dealing with is understanding what kind of benefits and gains are possible using this. So Benj, let's start with you. When you think about CRM, AI-based CRM and sales, what are you seeing in terms of the productivity impact for your customers using the AI-based CRM?
Yeah, so I can give you sort of a high level, and then I want to tell like a specific customer story. So across our customer base, our most successful customers see between a 5 and 10% increase in sales when they deploy our software across their business. And I'll share one example today. I'm sure many more will come as we go through, but we work with one of the largest electrical distributors in the US. They faced a really big challenge, which was how do we get new reps up to speed quickly. 20% of their sales reps are retiring in the next few years. They've got a lot of sort of older reps. And so they deployed our technology to analyze their data, guide their sales reps. We have a chat agent as well that they can work with to understand the products better. And when they deployed that, they were able to see over $10 million in sales uplift within this particular division. And since then, we've deployed much broader within this particular distributor. But for that business, that was worth between 5 and 10% increase in sort of like top line impact. And my favorite part of this implementation beyond just the revenue metrics is they really were able to get new reps up to speed more quickly, which is sort of a soft benefit. So this particular distributor, the VP of sales wanted to put this to the test. Could they get new reps up to speed more quickly? And he actually went out, and I guess he was buying cowboy boots or something, literally cowboy boots. He hired the cowboy boot salesman. The guy starts, and he's able to sell electrical products within 3 or 4 months at the same level as a rep that they poached from another competitor. And so hopefully that gives you kind of a sense. There's the hard dollar impact of, you get the sales uplift. And then there's what we're there's a bunch of soft impacts that come from being able to ramp reps more quickly and be able to grow the business that way too.
And for our audience, when you think about CRM, is there an efficiency benefit? Like I get more calls done, or I get more quotes done, or anything on that order? Absolutely.
And the place where we see that, so yes, because you can cut a bunch of prep time. So we work with especially retail distributor in Canada, and we were able to cut their we heard from them that their reps were spending 30 minutes preparing for every call. Once they implemented Proton, which does all the analysis for the sales rep, sort of tees it up and says, hey, here's what you should go talk about. They were able to cut that prep time down to 2 minutes per visit, which meant they could fit in a lot more visits. And if you think visits are a driver of revenue, which they obviously are, like the more customers you can visit, the more customers you can call on, the more you can sell. That was one of the ways that they were able to see, such an improvement in revenue.
Fantastic. We're going to come back to the hows of this later on, like what
Yeah.
it looks like on a day-to-day basis. Sahitya, when you think about Endeavor and the order entry and quote automation, how would you describe the benefit that's delivered from those?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question because, me as a salesperson, I care about two things. I care about one, winning net new customers, and then two, growing our current install base. And we think that, AI agents for quoting automation and sales order entry are going to help you with both of those things. And I'll give you an example too with the customer that we work with, extremely large building materials distributor. And on the first point about net new customers, here's a quote from one of their sales reps. We just visited their facility and deployed this into production. And one of the big things for them was, if we could turn around a quote in 5 minutes, our customers wouldn't even look at our competitors, right? Normally, this is taking them a day, or at best a couple of hours to put together a quote. But these AI agents are working in the background while the sales reps are doing, the high value things like being on the phone with the customer, doing order improvement and upselling, and they can just churn out these quotes or sales orders as they come in without needing to take a break because they're autonomous software programs. And it's about that winning more deals, providing a better experience than the competitors. Now, on the second point, there's also the ability to improve the customer experience for the existing folks you work with, right? If these AI agents can deliver an order faster and without any errors, well, your existing customers are going to be a lot happier. And again, your sales folks are freed up to do those higher value things like the upsell, the order improvement, managing churn, checking in, hopping on the phone and saying, hey, I know you usually buy this product every 2 months. You didn't buy it this time around. How are things going? And do you want to buy this again? Right. And so there's a dual benefit there in terms of not only net new, but also improving the customer experience for the existing folks that you have.
So as the quote turnaround time approaches 0, the win rate goes up.
Yes. As you can quote faster, it's a better experience for the customer. And they're just going to keep coming back to you over and over and over again, rather than the other folks that are still running on, slower, antiquated systems or not even using any software.
Huge. Do you have a sense about which is the bigger benefit, the increased win rate because of the reduced quote turnaround time, or the productivity benefit across a large pool of customer service reps?
Yeah, I assume we're probably going to get into this, but it's almost staggered in time. Obviously both of them are going to be benefits, but I think it's, the quoting is going to be such an immediate form factor improvement, right? It's just quick turnaround times. The customer is almost going to be like, wow, we've never had this kind of experience before. And then, you're going to have the slow kind of productivity gains as your folks can start shifting more time into this higher value tasks. So it's like short term, boom, 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 we're turning around quotes faster, better customer experience, more top line. And in the long term, you're going to see better productivity gains and better allocation of time.
Fantastic. Varun, when you think about the benefit of what you're delivering to sales through Infor, could you step us through that, please?
Yeah, so one of the most trending things that's happening in the industry, Jonathan, that I see is people wanted to get the same level of experience that they see with retailers like Amazon and Walmart and whatnot, right? So that's the pace at which even the distributors wanted to move. So we work backward from that, right? So some of the use cases that we are actually offering through our AI tools are how to embellish and product better catalogs, because these distributors typically have say multiple suppliers, and then they get their SKUs say from multiple different each of these different suppliers. So the question is how can you help me build a consistent database of say product catalogs, right? So I think that's one thing that they are trying to focus on. The another thing that we are also trying to build and focus on is say the inventory strategy, right? what are the inventory policies that I need to hold, like say, given that I would be able to provide a good economic order quantity, right? There are products that you could always carry, like a high value product that's going to eat into your holding cost, but it probably might be worth it. On the contrary, there are going to be products that will probably eat into your holding cost. That's kind of not worth it, right? Because it is not going to drive and good customer behavior in the long run. So we try to help understand and analyze and solve for some of those problems. Definitely on the pricing side, needless to say, what we have seen is like say there's a huge disconnect between like say what an executive would want or what a company's vision is versus like say what the sales is kind of trying to drive. So we help to bridge that gap, like I mentioned at the beginning. Then there's also this labor management, right? Like, so you have like say multiple people like say working kind of behind the scenes. So the question is like, say, how can you improve the efficiency and kind of keep the cost low? There, with the technology moving at such a fast speed, we are also experimenting a lot many new things. One thing that's my personal favorite that I would like to quote, which we have been working very actively, is the impact to the distributors because of these macro and the microeconomic factors, right? As an example, there was a port strike that most of the people are kind of aware of, like say that happened in the East Coast. So the question is, how can I quickly react to those kind of situations? What are the alternate products and where can I source those products and make sure that I'm able to keep up with my demand and fulfillment, right? So these are some of the exciting AI-based tools that we actually offer to our ERP customers.
Huge. Benj, if you could help us understand the mechanisms that your AI-based CRM uses to increase revenue. You mentioned cross, but talk to us. How does it work? What's it look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So sort of the way that our system actually helps drive revenue and sort of what we see across our customers, one component of it is this sort of like cross-sell, basically figuring out what a sales rep should focus on when they're talking to a particular customer. So I'm about to go visit a specific customer. As a sales rep, I need to, in sort of the old world, we see that a lot of those visits end up being very reactive. The rep shows up and they say, hey, do you need any, we sell dental supplies. Do you need dental products today? Where they go in the back room and they start counting stuff in the inventory and they say, well, you need to reorder these 5 things. So one mechanism is shifting from that sort of reactive motion to a more proactive motion. So instead of the rep being, just sort of showing up, they're going in and talking about very specific things that our system recommends. So I'll give you an example from a co-travel that I did with a rep not too long ago. We're sitting in the parking lot about to go into this manufacturing plant. And, our application says, hey, this customer should be buying $80,000 of wire. They're not currently buying. Great. I have no idea what the wire is, by the way. Just the system spits it out and I sort of go along. The guy says, great, we're going to go have a conversation about it. We go in, we talk about it with the customer. We walk out with an $80,000 order. That is a very clear mechanism for driving sales. So it's helping to figure out what you can spend the time on in those sales calls. That's one. The second piece is figuring out which customers to spend your time on. As sales reps, potentially a bigger challenge than preparing for each call is figuring out which customers to spend time with. We see sort of in the old world is reps spend time with their buddies, right? It's the sales reps that are they like the same football team or whatever. They're they can shoot the shit. Are we allowed to curse on this? I don't know if that's allowed, but so that's sort of the old world, and so you can
retroactively. Okay, Benj, you can do it retroactively.
Great. And so sort of the you can use AI to actually help prioritize customers, figure out where customers are churning, and make sure that reps are spending time with those customers that are going to have the highest impact on sort of the bottom line of the business. Those would be sort of the 2 most concrete ways that you can drive revenue with this. And I would say the third thing that we're seeing is ramping new salespeople is a huge, huge issue in this market. So many of the industry experts are retiring. And so how do you get new people up to speed faster? We have a chat agent that they're able to work with to understand products better, where they can ask, hey, what's the difference between these 2 products? What did this customer buy recently? And be able to get answers. And some of the other pieces we built out really help get reps up to speed more quickly.
For those of us that are old enough to remember Ghostbusters, who are you going to call? So I'm seriously, I mean, your thing answers who you're going to call, when you're going to call, what you're going to sell. right? And that,
Exactly.
so that's going to affect both efficiency and effectiveness of their sales.
So that's on the rep side. I think the other piece of this that we haven't talked about is really on the manager accountability side. So if the rep follows through on the plan that we're recommending or some version of that plan, we, without the rep really doing anything, we track what activities they're doing and then match that up with transaction data to be able to say, hey, this rep went in and talked about these things and they sold this and they didn't sell this. And that's like hugely valuable data that no one in distribution has today, right? The way that we manage reps today is like totally rear view mirror. We're like, did they hit the number last month? If they did, like, great, no questions for you. If they didn't, we're like, well, it was a tough month. The quotes were down. Let's see how next month goes. Versus being able to be super surgical about how you manage. So I'll give you an example. We work with one of the largest industrial distributors in the US. They use this data they're hiring lots and lots of people on an inside sales team. They use this kind of conversion data to be able to surgically understand which reps are ramping on which product categories in which areas to be able to figure out who's like not a fit for the team, but also where do we need to give more training to get these reps to really understand what they're selling better.
Amazing. You can really instrument that with what
Yes,
you're doing. Fantastic.
exactly.
Varun, if you could take us through the mechanisms of how people get benefit using the Infor tools in sales.
Yeah, so one of the common theme that I have noticed is personalization at scale. That's what, like, say, these people are kind of looking at, the distributors looking at. And how do we accomplish that is by building this concept called as control tower. So I'll give you an example of what that is within a customer story. So there was this customer who actually reached out to us, like, say, where they would want to reduce the time to serve their customers, which means that, like, say, a customer could reach out. Is one of the largest manufacturer and distributor of, like, say, spare parts in the here in the US. And the challenge that they faced is, like, they were having these multiple suppliers. So when a request actually comes to a salesperson, the time that they were taking to serve that salesperson was more than what it should be. Typically, it takes, like, say, even in the order of, like, say, 1 to 1.5 days. And that was actually not good. And that was actually not a good customer experience that they were actually offering. So their question is, like, say, can you make that quick? And that is the first step that we actually took to help the sales persona. So we were able to use build ML solutions, and then we were able to offer that and reduce that time to, like, say, almost near real time, right? I mean, similar to, like, say, a customer basically walks into a POS, they were able to, like, say, quickly understand what the customer want, and then they were able to offer it. But then if you think of the problem very deeply, to something that even Benj was kind of inclining towards, is it enough that if a salesperson is actually going to just sell that one product? Very likely no. So the question becomes, like, say, what are the other substitute products, or, like, say, the cross sell and the upsell that can be kind of offered, right? So the next natural push that came down is, like, hey, help me understand, like, say, how can I kind of sell more, right? And this is a proactive approach that actually Info took, and we were actually advising and providing a strategic advice to our customers, saying, like, say, hey, you probably need to be thinking along those lines. And it was a very welcoming thought. Like, they were very receptive about it. So the next thing that we ended up doing is, like, say, providing them the upsell and the cross-sell recommendation. And in that process, they were able to increase their basket size and eventually their revenue. Now, the next natural problem that could happen is when you're actually trying to offer a cross-sell and an upsell, are you being competitive in the market? Which means that, like, are you able to provide me a price that I would be willing to pay and not go to a competitor that is probably in the next floor, right? So the next natural thing that we need to do is to understand, like, say, how to bundle and, like, say, provide a better pricing strategy over there. When you're basically pricing, the question becomes, like, say, hey, how can I improve my margin and improve my revenue? And as you all can imagine, like, say, both goes in, like, say, the opposite direction. So we have to find that very sweet spot, like, say, where we can provide a competitive price, but without giving up on your margin. Now, how do you know that, like, say, the customer you are actually giving price so that, like, they are a repeat customer? We go and then we find out, like, so what are the customer purchase behavior, what are their customer purchase patterns, right? And then provide personalized recommendation, personalized, like, say, offers to make sure that, like, say, we are able to keep the long-term stickiness of the customer. So to long story short, to answer your question, Jonathan, is we try to take a data-driven approach, trying to understand, like, say, hey, where should we start? How should the journey unfold? And then we provide that as a strategic advice to our customers, and then we actually carry them along in the specific journey.
Okay. Yeah, and I think one of the things when you and I were prepping for the show, we talked about on the pricing side is that a lot of pricing now has a very static flavor. People will update their pricing tables once a year, or twice a year, maybe 4 times a year. But it sounds like with the approach that you have, you're able to look at much more dynamic issues
Yep.
in pricing rather than a handful of times per year.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you actually brought that up, because what we are doing is it is not just the frequency of the data with which we are actually seeing these price from an historical data standpoint. We are also trying to take a forward look and trying to understand how the competitors are actually pricing the product.
Mhm.
How are the price of these raw materials like say steel, copper, or whatever it is kind of changing, and how should you price the product based on like say how the competitors are kind of pricing the product, right? It's always not necessary that you will have to drop your price or you will have to react to what like say your competitor is pricing. And this is where that personalization that I told becomes very important, because your competitor might not be Walmart, or it might not be Amazon. Your competitor might probably be a Home Depot or someone else along those lines, right? So the question really becomes trying to understand who are your competitors, where should you position yourself in the market, what is the line of product that we are kind of talking about, how much they are advanced in it, and like say how much you are kind of backward in, or you might be much more advanced, right? So I think trying to understand that from a data standpoint and coming up with the right pricing strategy is the most important thing, which I feel AI can do today, which is what we are also focusing on.
Fantastic. Sahitya, when we look at the solution that you offer, how is it that these orders come? Is it all email? Are these PDFs? Is it voicemail? Is it handwritten? What does it look like? What are the mechanisms that drive the order automation and the quote automation for you?
Yeah, it's by the time we come in, often it's a really manual mess. It's a bunch of different things. A lot of those things that you just mentioned. I'll give an example. We work with a mid-sized construction products distributor, and for them, they just did this e-commerce implementation. So they've got a storefront, and they would love it if all of their customers just use e-commerce, because it would tie in with their ERP system, and it would just be a really smooth flow, right? But the kind of thing that they talk about internally is, we differentiate from our competitors by providing a better customer experience, right? They provide a better experience by meeting their customers where they are. So instead of forcing them to adapt to e-commerce, they're thinking, how do we deal with, the 80-90% of volume of orders and quotes that, like you said, comes in through email, through fax, through phone, through text, right? All of these things that people are normally used to using, where they don't want to change the way they've been doing things. And e-commerce isn't going to solve that. And for a long time, people thought it would be EDI, but the implementations are too long and too expensive. And so now the technology is finally here, where we can take these various different ways people send in orders, through phone, through fax, through email, and actually deliver an e-commerce like experience where it's extremely, extremely streamlined, really fast, and errorless. And so, tangible example here is, with this mid-size construction products distributor, they do about 10 or 20% volume through e-commerce, and the rest of it is phone call or PDF. And they've got a ton of volume coming in, in the form of email PDFs or these phone calls. And our AI agent, what it does now for phone calls is it sits in on the call like a ride along as the sales rep is on the phone, and the person will describe the order they want. They're like, I want 3 pieces of this, 5 pieces of that, and 10 pieces of that. And the AI agent is on the call and it's listening and it clocks in. I want 10 of this, 3 of that, and 4 of that. And by the time the call is over, the order's already into the ERP system, right? Which is magical because the sales rep doesn't have to go enter that in the ERP system after the call. Or an email comes in and a PDF is there. And instead of the sales rep, looking at the PDF, going on a lunch break, coming back, trying to clock in everything and type everything in, it's already done automatically because the AI agent's working in the background. And now these sales reps can do what they actually want to do, which is talk to the customer on the phone, do the things like the order improvement, the upsell, managing the churn, rather than doing what no one really wants to do, which is order entry and doing manual data entry and scanning these PDFs or phone calls. And so that's kind of where we see the tangible improvements in productivity from these AI agents.
I want to talk now about what it looks like for when this works really well with your best performers, and maybe where it can go awry. So Varun, when you think about the pricing that you do, what does it look like for your best performers, and what are they doing differently that's allowing them to get really good results with the pricing and selling more than the companies who are not getting as good a result?
So we don't take the classic consulting approach of asking the customers, tell us what you want to solve for, or tell us what your problem is, and we will help you with it. So instead, the question becomes, what insights can you provide about your existing business today in the form of a data? And that's very important for us, because what we have seen time and again is the customer feels like, say, they have a pain problem in one area X, but then what we have noticed is their pain problem is not really on X, but it's on a different area Y. And that's the reason why we are kind of taking that approach. And while initially engaging with the customers, we make it clear to them that, like, say, we would like to be a strategic partner, and our goal is to make sure that we are able to maximize your revenue, minimize the cost, and in that process, minimize the total cost of ownership as well, right? I think those are the key things that we kind of focus on to begin with. And then, like I walked through that one example that I mentioned to you, right? We take a stepwise approach. We try to see where is the first low-hanging fruit available and make sure that we are able to push that into production. And then, like, say, the customers can start realizing the value for it. That helps us build trust with our customers as well. And this has supposed to be a very proven approach. And we also are very upfront in admitting the fact that AI knows only what it knows. It does not know what it doesn't know, which means that, like, say, a human in the loop, right? That also becomes very important. And I'm sure that we are probably going to get to it, like, say, in the upcoming sections, is talk about, like, say, this change management, right? How quickly can you adopt, and how can you provide feedback, and how in that process we can improve how the model learns and benefits, and eventually providing value to your business, right? So we kind of take a radical way of approaching things, but then we are also very thoughtful and incremental in the value that we would want to deliver over a period of time.
Okay, so I'll ask it maybe a different way. What does it look like for a customer that does really well with this versus one that doesn't do so well? What is it about them, or what they're doing?
So the customers who don't do well, what I have seen is they are trying to focus on the wrong areas or the wrong problems to kind of solve for, right? If there is an opportunity for you to reduce your cost by 10x and improve your margin by, like, say 20x, why don't you focus on that? That's a question, right? And that's where I think the data kind of becomes very important. And some of these customers, what I have seen is they say that, and then this is the area that they really would want to focus on, is what they keep hounding on. And at the end of the day, like, say, their change management is also kind of not aligned, right? Like, say, it takes, like, say, multi-months to basically kind of drive that specific adoption, and by the time they see the value, then it becomes an oh shit moment, right? Saying, like, say, I mean, I'm not getting the value for, like, say, what I need. So I think that change in mindset is something that we actually try to offer right at the beginning as part of, like, a strategic advisement, is what I would say.
Benj, for you, when it works, what is it that is different about the customers for whom it really works? What is it? Something about product data? Take us through, what it looks like.
Two
when it really
things.
works.
There's two things that differentiate customers that are successful versus not. Number one, the customers that are successful have a business problem they're trying to solve that's driven by the sales organization. So the sales team is engaged, and the sales team wants to drive better rep productivity, wants to help reps spend less time doing admin work. The sales team is engaged and driving the project. Not to say that IT is not involved, but it's driven by the business. And I'll give you a counter example to that. One of our least successful customers of all time, we had a CIO. This is a decently sized company, decently large company. CIO comes in, is all enamored. Oh, we want to use AI. It's fancy, blah, blah, blah. We do this implementation. We were never engaged with the sales leaders. And turns out neither was he. So once we do the whole implementation, we go to the sales team, and the sales team says, sorry, what do you want me to do? Like, I don't even know what this is. Needless to say, that did not go very well. So the first thing is the customers that are most successful, it's driven by business stakeholders, usually sales. The second thing is the customers that are most successful hold their teams accountable through the change curve. So if you're trying to change your organization from being reactive on the sales side to being proactive, that's not just like some magic thing like that's just going to happen overnight. It's a behavior change, and behavior change, as we all know, is really hard. And so the organizations that are most successful hold their teams accountable through the change curve. So I'll give you an example. We work with another electrical distributor. They were trying to go through this transition from sort of reactive to proactive. And they were having trouble initially. And so what they did was we worked with them to design sort of an incentive plan in the beginning. So there was a carrot and a stick. The carrot was, hey, if you follow this sort of new sales process, we're going to pay you a little bit extra. And the stick is, we're going to hold you accountable to doing that. 6 months later, they got rid of the carrot and they continue to see improved adoption because guess what? The reps figured out when I'm proactive, I make more money. The companies that don't sort of do the hard work to get over that initial hump, not to say they're not successful, but they're not as successful as our best customers.
So your both points make sense. Point number one seems like it applies across any of these AI for sales things that we're talking about, right?
It's not actually about AI.
Yeah.
Right? All the things we're talking about here, whether you're talking about pricing, you're talking about order entry automation, whatever it is, there's on some level, you've got either it's a customer change or it's a rep change. Somebody's got to change what they're doing. That's hard. You need the leaders of those people that need to change something involved, or else you're not going anywhere.
So the sales folks will make or break whatever you're doing.
In our experience.
Yeah, very nice. Sahitya, when you think about your best performers, what are the things that you notice that they're doing differently than people who are not getting as much value?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, but kind of zooming out, the main objective is to deliver the best experience for all of your customers, not just some subset of them. And we're definitely not, the first order entry automation or quoting automation product on the market. Hopefully we're the last, largely because we think the technology is finally here where organizations are able to scale to their entire business. Where traditionally, this order entry automation has been for a subset, some, maybe top 20%. Now using AI agents, you can actually automate the orders for every one of your customers, right? Where any customer, even if they're in the tail end, can come to you, submit their order, and it gets entered into the ERP system in a minute, right? And kind of when we think about what enables this sort of success, it's starting to think long-term about the data that you want to be holding, right? The organizations that we work with that are really successful, that get that 99.9% accuracy because you want this thing to be right all the time and you don't want to be entering and ordering incorrectly, they have their sales orders, right? They have the PDFs. And we're not talking about needing hundreds of thousands of PDFs. We're talking about just having 100 sales orders on hand where you can say, hey, here's 100 sales orders. Let's teach the AI, the kinds of different products that we hold. Right? Or, just giving a product catalog, having that kind of data on hand where an AI can take that and now really raise the accuracy. On the other end, the flip side of that is folks, who are not successful are the ones that are very concerned thinking about, we need an AI strategy. We need to spend 6 months to a year thinking about all the different ways ChatGPT could be applied. Let's map out the entire business, almost create a digital twin, and start bringing in the external consultants to talk about digital transformation, right? That doesn't end up being particularly successful because you're really missing out on where AI could be applied today. When we think about our implementations, I'm sure we'll get to this later, and I'm happy to explain why, but our implementations, it just takes, a day or at worst a week, right? And you're just leaving so much on the table if you say, hey, before we even get started, we need to think about what ChatGPT is. How does the data inside a language model work? That's not really, like Ben said, it's not really related to the question of, how do we actually do sales order entry? The AI definitely helps, but it's about solving the business problem rather than talking about, what is the data model here, or what does ChatGPT do, or what does our AI policy look like?
Okay, so in your case, they're willing to take, they're rolling their sleeves up. They're giving the data that's necessary and the training examples necessary to get higher accuracy.
Hmm.
And what about the buy-in from the reps? Are you noticing anything about, Benj mentioned from the sales reps, but what about the customer service reps? What are you noticing there in terms of their buy-in and involvement?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I fully agree with Benj, which is, we work with both the business stakeholder and the IT department. And, IT is definitely going to get involved in something like this, but a project, like even a sales order automation or quoting automation using these AI agents is not going to be successful without the sales folks feeling like, hey, I'm involved in this process, right? This is something that's going to work with me and something I'm going to use, versus just having, IT purely involved. And so to that end, we make a very strong effort to always show up in person, deploy this product with the folks where they can use it and see it being used before they even have to pay a dime for it. And they actually feel like, hey, this is reducing some of my burden where I wish I wasn't spending 50% of my day, me as a sales rep, I wish I wasn't spending 50% of my day entering orders in or, writing up quotes. Now I can do the other things on my to-do list that keep getting pushed to tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, which is calling up X customer, right? My high priority customer who I've been meaning to call, but keeps getting, pushed because of the sales orders that I have to enter. And so we've seen that, sales folks are really excited. So are the CSRs, right? Because it's solving that main problem that they've been hoping for. I had a business owner who told me, I've been waiting for the solution for 10 years now. Where have you been my entire life? It's totally all about buy-in from the business department.
Makes total and 100% sense. Yeah, and I can imagine that the CSRs might have some fear about them losing their job, but if you get it focused on freeing them up for higher level functions, then that's a win for them. So, let's shift now to what's involved in managing the change for these different categories of AI-based sales solutions. So, Benj, when you think about a CRM implementation, what does the change management look like there? What are the timeframes look like?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to what I was talking about before. I mean, so the first piece has to be getting the sales leadership engaged and excited about sort of switching from this reactive motion to a proactive motion. And then our approach to change management that we developed over the last few years, working with lots and lots of distributors, is the following. So basically, you got to get the sales leadership on board. That's number one. Number two is you got to set up the right incentives, like I was describing with that electrical distributor. And it's different depending on the business, but you got to get the right incentives in place to get sort of the sales team ready to go, and we'll be excited about getting through that change curve. And then the third thing is, at least what we've seen work well, is sort of we call it the guru training model. So we will train experts on the customer's sales team, who are not necessarily like the VP of sales, but someone who's more embedded in the business, closer to the front line. We make them experts on Proton, and then we work with them to actually train the rest of the sales team. And so what we've found is that when you follow that methodology, what happens is those gurus kind of become like the mastermind bridge between Proton, the software, and the distributor's business, because we're just never going to know all the lingo, all the different components of a individual distributor's context. And so we've seen that those three things are really what help get people through the change curve.
So that last piece is kind of getting like a key opinion leader or a power user that other folks are going to look to.
Exactly. So I mean, every business is just a little bit different. And so this person's able to understand, hey, like, here's exactly how we're going to get value from. They're able to do that last mile value translation from software to what the distributor sales rep really needs. Because what we've seen is, and we're all software guys on this call. That's just it. We're software people. We're not. I mean, I grew up my family's distribution business. We spend a lot of time in the field with distributors, but I'm not running a distribution business. So there's sort of very detailed context about an individual business that person who's closer to the front line is going to be able to understand. Those are nuances that they need to be able to translate. I'll give you an example. So we've got a feature that we call product initiatives, where you can basically load in a list of products to switch someone over to. So if they're buying X, we want to switch them to Y. Very general feature. I just described it sort of in its most general terms. For some businesses, like my family business, that's really important for switching customers to private label. We do a lot of private label business. So that's when we train the sales team at my family business on how to use that feature, we don't call it product initiatives. We don't talk about switching. We talk about, hey, we want to grow a private label business. Here's how we're going to do it. It's identifying opportunities for you. Our AD members, so affiliated distributors, they use that as a way to switch to preferred suppliers. They don't talk about private label. It's a totally different objective, but it's really more tied to rebates. And so that's just a simple example, but there's 100 examples like that. And when you follow the methodology that I just described, that's really what, when you do that final translation, that's when it really sticks.
Fantastic. Briefly, time to value on your offering in the category.
Yeah. So we have at our best, people can pay back the system in 2 months, but definitely within the first year.
Wow, that's amazing. I want to tell an interesting story about this power user. I don't know if any of you've read the book called Astro Ball. It's kind of like Moneyball 2.0, except it's way more analytic. They took analytics to the entire business, and there was they started doing motion mechanics on a batter's swing. And most of the players were reluctant to do this, but there was like one guy that really got on it, and I think it's Jose Altuve, and he's way outperformed because of the motion mechanics. So then it was an adoption curve based on somebody getting an early success and then going from there. I highly recommend the book, by the way. It's very colorful and very peak, and there's a few too many F-bombs in it, but it's very insightful. So,
and the data in baseball is amazing. My dad and I we're in a fantasy league. We're a co-manager, and we look at all that data all the time. It's wild how much data there is now in baseball. So
yeah,
cool.
they have something in the Astros organization they call the Cave, where all the analytics AI guys are working. That's where I want to go work. Varun, when you think about the change management and time to value for your Infor offering, talk to us about that, please.
Yeah, I think Benj and Sahitya very rightly captured the tier one conversation, right? Aligning the business process and making sure that, like, say, the people on the front is going to be aware of, like, say, what the change that is kind of coming and kind of prepping up for them, and the drive adoption is important. But if we take that into the next level, I would call it as tier two conversation, is move away from this notion of like the big bang rollout. That is one thing that we kind of strongly recommend for. Make sure to get your ducks in a row right at the beginning itself. And the one thing that I keep telling my customers as well as my team is focus on the four most important things. I call it as an cafe model, which is what is the configuration that you're kind of going to offer to me so that I can actually scale and then I can play with it. What should my price point look like? If, say, for example, like say the price of the steel is going to drop by like say 3%, 4%, right? Or I'm having some dead stock in the inventory, I would like to get rid of it. But at the same time, I don't want, currently the margin is looking like say 15%, but I would want to make sure that the margin does not go below like say 10%, right? So what are the configuration and additional features and capabilities that you can provide? That's number one. The second one is like say the accuracy, because I mean the AI models knows only what it knows at the end of the day. It's as good as the data. So the accuracy is going to be like say garbage in, garbage out. So what kind of accuracy can be provided right out of the bat is the question. Now I'm sure that like say the accuracy is not going to be great at the beginning. So the question is what kind of systematic feedback loop you can actually create so that the model can self-learn itself over a period of time with some kind of a human in the loop. And the last and the most important thing is the explainability. Why am I seeing what I'm seeing, right? I think this is very important in order to drive that trust and the confidence. You're saying that, like, say, the price should look like, say, $35 per pound for, like, say, maybe an 10-inch steel, but then the question is why, right? I think, like, say, providing that explainability is also becoming essential, and it should be natively offered as part of the product. Now, with all these things, I would say that all these four things, I would say that it's a good litmus test to say whether you have a full control of the system, and then using that, are you able to basically drive the business value, right? So These are things that I would like to at least focus on from a change management perspective. And regarding the time to value, the question really boils down to is what is the increase in the revenue that I'm actually driving? And with Info Solutions, what you've seen is typically it floats somewhere on 8 to 10% increase in revenue right out of the bat based on the customers that we have actually seen by the solution that we're kind of offering. And on the flip side of it, like, so what is the cost to serve, right? Because revenue, by not looking at, like, say, the other side of the factor, is not going to be is not something that would anyone would recommend for a business. And then finally, the most important thing is what is the total cost of ownership, right? The question really comes down to is like, say, hey, I'm deploying this solution, what do you want me to do with it, right? So I think lowering the cost of ownership is also going to be the most important thing. From a time to value perspective, Info Solutions, we basically try to deploy the solutions, like, say, anywhere between, like, say, 2 to 3 weeks, not more than that. And then we would want to make sure that, like, say, the business is able to see the value within, like, say, the within a month of basically deploying the solution. And we work very kind of closely with them to make sure that they're able to see the full benefit of it through and through.
Fantastic. Sahitya, help us understand the change management for the quote automation and order automation, and also the kind of time to value that you're seeing.
Yeah, one of the big misconceptions I see folks come in with is, because of the history of the space, they come in thinking, hey, is my AI transformation, is this going to take me another year or two? And, when and I'll tell you guys a customer story here where one of the folks we work with, pretty large automotive parts supplier, for them, what we did is we took the crawl, walk, run approach, right? Let's get our hands dirty, but let's not also rush into it. And we didn't want it to be a heavy burden on their IT team. And we wanted the business folks to start getting value from it as soon as possible. And, they're like, what is this going to take us, like 2 or 3 months? And we literally got our solution out to them in about 3 hours, which was record-breaking time even for us, which is crazy to think about because when you hear AI agents or generative AI, the prevailing ideology is like, it's going to take me a long time to get this hooked up to all my systems and get it working and quality assurance. But literally all it takes is a CSV, so a snapshot of your product catalog. And this AI agent can start working autonomously and doing the order entry and doing the quoting. And that's really all it takes. And, we talked about having the data earlier, having 100 or 200 sales orders. But, in reality, to get started, you don't even need that in the beginning. And we started small, right? We started quickly, but we started small where we only were processing, sales orders for a very small percentage, maybe 5% of the orders that were coming in, a very small percentage of their customers. But slowly, we started building up. And, now a couple months later, we're already working with, some 70, 80% of their customers, which is scaled, to the business, kind of going back to that point I was making, which is traditionally it's been impossible to scale to the entire business. Now you can scale to the entire customer base very quickly without needing very much change management at all. And it wasn't a burden on their IT. Their IT department, I'll admit it, was a little bit nervous in the beginning. They were like, how much involvement is this going to have? How much services are we going to have to rely on? What's the integration process going to look like? But again, we showed up in person. I love to show up in person. Couple hours got it stood up, and the folks were using it the next day, the very next day. And this thing constantly learns. It learns over time. It gets better. It never makes the same mistake again. And I think that's the real crucial power of AI and AI agents in particular, compared to this traditional history of software that we've had. And I think it's a very exciting time, very quick ROI. The very next week, we were processing orders and generating a ton of value for them. And it's awesome. It's amazing.
I think what all of you have shared is amazing in different ways, and we look forward to seeing the evolution of your solutions and what they are doing for distributors to improve sales effectiveness and sales efficiency. I wanted to shift now to a announcement about a next presentation that we're going to have. This is our last presentation for the year. Last program for the year, but in the new year, mid-month, we're going to have the state of AI and distribution, and we're doing a survey right now. Some of you may be receiving that survey. It'll be sponsored by Infor. One of the things that we've seen, this will be the 3rd year we've done this survey, is that things are evolving rapidly for how distributors are using AI. The originally there was a lot of excitement and fear, and now it's shifted towards excitement for a large swath of distributors. And we hear about more and more exotic and interesting use cases that people are coming up with. So we're going to be talking about the state of AI and distribution on January 15th at noon Eastern Time, 9 Pacific, right now sponsored by Infor. We wish all of you a happy holidays, and thank you to our distinguished panelists for a great session today.
Jonathan, thanks so much for having us.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you for having us. Merry Christmas and happy holidays.
Thank you.